optimize the design and the architecture so that they function properly and maintain a high value of the internal credits, and then network those together on a wide area basis so that we have a credit system that's locally controlled but is globally useful, that allows us to buy things far from home.
I mean, a couple of things come up for me in this transition. I mean, what seems implicit in if we talk about peak oil or Richard Heidenberg's work, is that the amount of comfort and privilege that people have been used to, may not be available in the same way in the future. Do you feel that's true, or do you feel like a better economic system could somehow allow for different types of value exchanges?
Well, I think we have to look at the qualitative factors that impinge on quality of life, not only the quantitative. I think to a large extent we've been trying to fill a need that isn't material with stuff. So, you get depressed, you go shopping, and it really doesn't solve your problem, but it just fills up the garage and fills up the house. And, most of us have too much stuff. A boom industry in this country is storage lockers. You see them everywhere. You don't see those in Asia. You don't see them in Europe. I travel a lot, and it's really a North American phenomenon. It's amazing. And why do we keep all this stuff that we don't need? It's not only that we're transient and mobile. There are a lot of people that just don't have enough space in their houses or apartments to keep all the stuff that they've accumulated. And we think, well, maybe I'll need that someday, but generally you don't. You might as well get rid of it. But we're in a consumer society. We've been educated to be consumers, and we're told that when the country is in a recession, what should we do? We should go out and spend. We should go buy something. Well, when you think of it, it's absurd. Why buy something you don't need just to keep a defective system going? No, we need a better distribution of the things that we produce. We've solved the production problem. We're able to produce enormous quantities of stuff, way beyond what we need. And yet we have pockets of poverty that are extreme, and pockets of ill health from malnutrition and lack of clean drinking water and adequate basic health care. So, we need to do a better job of distributing the wealth and making sure that everybody gets what they need. And as we decentralize our economy and empower local communities, that will happen.
Cool. Thank you.
Well, my inspiration about that comes from Jane Jacobs. She wrote a book called Cities and the Wealth of Nations, and she made this point that cities are the salient economic entities, and that economic progress and development and innovation comes through this process of import substitution. That a city will eventually, if it has the resources, make itself some things that it formerly imported from outside. So as you continue this process of import substitution, you don't stop trading with the outside, you just trade different things. But more and more you produce what you need internally. And this goes for national economies too. The Chinese, for example, have been producing a lot of things for the export market, and they've accumulated a lot of dollars by exporting things into the U.S. market. What they have to do is to start producing more for domestic consumption and become less reliant on the export market. And likewise, local communities have to produce as much as they can internally and become less dependent on selling stuff outside, and not necessarily outside of the country, but outside of the city region. So this is a process that works hand in hand with the local control of credit. You see, when credit is controlled by entities that are distant, let's say the big banking companies in New York City or Chicago or Los Angeles, then the city is not in a position to allocate credit as it needs to develop its own economy. That credit will be allocated by someone somewhere else to some other use, to develop some other economy, or to simply waste on war material and imperial acquisition. We have a project that we're working on in India that started up 2 or 3 years ago, and we're trying to implement a bioregional development plan based on mutual credit clearing. In my book, I outline in chapter 16 a 5-stage process for doing this. And this chapter has also been excerpted on my blog. It's on beyondmoney.net, so you can download it and read it there. But basically it calls for a process of mapping the territory, finding out who's doing business in the region, what are they selling, what are they buying, where are they sourcing their supplies from, how much are they getting inside the community or the region, and how much are they getting from outside the region. And so then you try to promote this process of import substitution by getting these people to be aware of one another, and there may be sources of supply that a buyer is unaware of. So you can shift the sourcing from outside vendors to local vendors. That's the first stage. The second stage is once you have these people doing more business with one another, then you give them an alternative way of paying each other. Instead of using national currency, they can use the credit clearing process by cooperating in these mutual credit clearing circles. Then once you have a smooth operating credit clearing circle, you can use the collective credit of the members of that credit clearing circle to issue a collective currency to people that are outside the circle but still in the community. So now you have at the third stage, a supplemental currency that can circulate within the region, and since it was issued by regional producers, it has to come back to those producers to be redeemed for the goods and services that they have to offer. And the fourth stage is to develop your social capital and your supporting infrastructure. And the fifth stage is to provide a new objective unit of account or standard of value. You see, we have to measure value as well as having a medium of payment. Right now the dollar is both a payment medium and a measure of value. And the dollar, as we know it, is simply a Federal Reserve note. What is a Federal Reserve note worth? Well, it's worth whatever you can get for it in the market. Originally, the dollar was defined in terms of a weight of silver. So when a bank issued a dollar note, that was an obligation of the bank, but it was denominated in terms of dollars, which were denominated in silver units. So if you didn't trust that bank that issued that note, you might refuse to accept that dollar banknote, or you might discount it. You might say, well, there's some risk that this bank is going to default before I can take this dollar and get silver for it. So you might say, well, I'll give you 90 cents worth of goods instead of $1's worth because I don't trust that note. So we need to have an objective measure against which to measure not only goods and services but the value of the currency itself.